It feels like maybe the market is starting to come around to this idea that transitory is going to be for longer, at least. With oil prices at 7-year highs, with the rest of the commodities complex rallying as well, is this a real risk that perhaps investors haven't priced in?
Well, it's definitely a risk that we have to bear in mind. And I think there are a few things here. So you've got, we're coming off an unusual year in 2020 where inflation was low. So you've got a low base there. Going into 2021. And secondly, I think with COVID continuing to weigh on the world, you are likely to see supply chain disruptions pop up here and there. And we've seen that happen over the year with semiconductor shortages, and that's led to rises in input costs as well. So that's also going to add some inflationary pressure there. And I think thirdly, as the world moves towards a lower emission, a lower carbon direction in the transition towards renewables, or in that transition, you away from cheaper fossil fuels, and as you ramp up renewable energy as well, you might also see higher costs. I think having said that, as some of these things pass through and as you have COVID ease a bit better and people manage their inventory levels better, some of this will ease, but not all of them. So I think if the supply chain issues ease a little, that will help. But over the longer term, we might see this tick up more. So something to bear in mind.
Right. In the meantime, though, we have seen energy stock just wildly outperform compared to their peers, right? Take a look at this chart, really showing the huge margin in terms of that outperformance. Would you think that there's further room to run, given how well they've done so far?
Sure. I think the immediate spike on the back of this global energy shortage that we are seeing now has probably run its course already. For further upside from here, I think that's something we've got to continue watching to see how different governments and different markets contain this. I mean, there are several things there, right? So if I were to split that down into two parts, you've got, firstly, the shortage in the near term that people are trying to address. That's going to keep prices elevated. But again, if you look at things over the longer term also, and as we touched on, as you're transiting in towards a lower carbon world and as you're ramping things up, you might see issues where you have shortages come out from maybe poorer weather. I mean, if you look at China, for example, over summer, you've had lower hydropower, lower wind that's impacting your renewable energy sources. So that could also result in a few hiccups here and there.
Which it takes me to my next question. Would you be a little bit more cautious on renewable investments now that perhaps you are seeing the energy crisis spread across China and policymakers themselves could get cautious about completely ditching fossil fuels?
Sure. And that's a good question to ask as well. I think we have to take a step back when it comes to this rhetoric. Over the longer term, we continue to expect that the world will push towards a lower carbon environment. That journey is clear. It's just how long we get to that point. I mean, the benefit of us as long-term investors is through these hiccups that we're currently going through, this actually does provide us with opportunities to add to some of these positions. So over the long term, we're quite comfortable with this stance here.
What do you feel about the long term for tech, especially in Korea? Because now there are fears that we're going to see this Chinese-style tech crackdown there with the hearings just in full swing.
Sure. That's another area that's been adding a lot of excitement to the markets for us as well. We're still seeing that play out. So there are a few things there that we would have to continue watching. But I think having said that, as we've discussed earlier as well, we've seen some heavy sell-offs in some of these large tech names. And so we've actually been able to find value in some of these areas there. I mean, of course, we've got to be selective with some of these things. But I think what we believe is that, again, it's not about killing these tech giants. These tech giants are still really important for the entire ecosystem within Korea. So I think it's just about finding a sustainable way of growing these ecosystems while allowing innovation to foster in other areas as well. So that's why we continue to be positive on some of these names over the longer term and have been quite happy adding to them. But I think having said that also, this regulatory overhang might continue to weigh on things for a while. So that's the timeline risk that you want to bear in mind as well if you're adding selectively.